What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV, aka Darth Apocalypse. All right, so this is another video request from Dorian, and he wanted me to talk about a hypothetical series between 2008 Boston Celtics and the 1997 Utah Jazz. And Utah, of course, won a franchise record 64 games that year, a record that still stands. Karl Malone won the first of his two league MVPs, and the Utah Jazz ultimately, of course, made their first trip to the NBA Finals, in which they, unfortunately, if you're a Utah Jazz fan, they lost in six to the Chicago Bulls. All right. The 2008 Boston Celtics, of course, was the first season in which we saw the uh, the teaming together of Paul Pierce with Ray Allen, who signed via free agency, and Kevin Garnett, who was traded to the Boston Celtics, right? And then, of course, that team won 66 games. And although they did have the worst playoff run as far as win percentage ever for the NBA champion, they only went 16-10 during the regular season. Ultimately, they did win a championship in six in the finals versus Kobe Bryant's Lakers, although those Lakers were pretty banged up. Now, when you look at a team like Boston that year, in the regular season, they were a historically great defensive team. I would rank them only behind like that 2004 Pistons team. I would put them on par with those Bulls teams. Didn't they only give up like 90 points a game in 2008 during the regular season? But yet they went 7 games with a Hawks team that went like 37-45. They went 7 games with a Cavaliers team that won like 45, 46 games or something. I don't know. It's something tells me, as far as matching up these two teams against one another, that if the Jazz were able to dictate the pace of this series and the face of this series, if this was more of a half court kind of grinded out series where they're able to effectively run the pick and roll against, or at least try to run the pick and roll against this other team, then this would be a closer series than people would expect. And look, if Karl Malone and I would say Jeff Hornacek is the X factor here, if Jeff Hornacek's able to average 20 points per game or more on, something close to 50%, 40%, 90%. If Stockton's able to effectively penetrate and, although he's a little bit older here, if he's able to run the point properly, if they're able to slow down the pace but still be able to effectively get some transition buckets, as much as this 2018 choked, albeit, some of it gotta do with Doc Rivers. I mean, I'm factoring that in, man. Doc Rivers is the head coach of that team versus Jerry Sloan, an all-time great coach. I'm because on paper, you would say, yeah, the Celtics have more talent, but it's not always about talent. It's about how teams execute. it's not always about what team has the most talent. And I'm looking at the center position. It's pretty much a wash. Greg Osutag is a bum, although he is the best center that Utah Jazz team probably has ever had. And you got Boston, you got Kendrick Perkins, who's a bum. So I think the interesting positions with this team are going to be shit, two or three other positions. One of them's going to be the power forward position, Malone versus Garnett. One uh, is still close to his prime, which is interesting because this Utah Jazz team is considered more of a veteran team, right? And you had guys on this team, especially Stockton, Malone, and Hornacek, who were still playing at a high level despite being older. But, this ain't the Lakers either. This ain't the 98, 97 Lakers where, although they're having good team success during the regular season, their youth and their experience showed during the playoffs. No, this is an experience, collectively at least, an experienced Celtic team, which can communicate on the floor together. Fuck what Doc Rivers is saying. We're going to go out here and win this game by ourselves. And we're going to use our defense and basketball IQ and execution to do this. So to me, that's not an asset that the Jazz are going to have. Their experience, as they're able to have, in the era they played in. Also, you can make an argument that Utah played in an era where they were just favorable. And by that I mean they played in an era that was right before the rise of Tim Duncan Spurs, right before Kobe and Shaq really got their shit together. And it came in an era where the Houston Rockets were just starting to fall off. Right. Barkley's Suns were falling off. Clyde Drexler's Portland team had fell off. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't the same powerhouse conference that it had been just 2, 3 years earlier. So, point guard, you got a young Rondo. He's still young, green. Stockton, is right there at what I would call going to the downside of his career, but I get the edge to Stockton. Um, you know, Rondo's a little bit more dynamic. He's younger, but Stockton has the experience factor. Stockton is the better shooter, obviously, and by definition, the better scorer. But, you know, when you look at, for instance, the two is Hornacek versus Ray Allen. So you got two shooters, two great shooters. Ray's more prolific. Ray's a little bit more athletic, obviously. Ray's bigger. So I still give the edge to Ray Allen. At the three, you have Brian Russell versus Paul Pierce. So we know who has that advantage. I mean, it's not even like fuck around with it. You know what I'm saying? So you got Malone and Garnett. And, man, that's gonna be a very interesting, fiery matchup. Garnett, of course, is a beast on defense. He's going to have the defensive advantages. He has the physical advantages. He's taller. He's longer. Paul's Karl Malone is stronger, obviously. So I think it's going to be a battle. I think Karl Malone has the advantage down low. Garnett is not an overpowering, post presence. So in that situation, Karl Malone would have the advantage if they're if it's more of a bang fest down low. Pause again. Jesus Christ, what am I saying in this video? But this is also an older Karl. This is 34. And Carl didn't really have the energy to expend as much down low as much as he used to, which is why he worked religiously on his outside shot to expand his range. So, Carl would shoot from 16, 17 feet out and became the improved jump shooter. But at that stage, Garnett was a guy that was shooting from 18, 19 feet out. Plus, I don't see Carl blocking Garnett's shot per se. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. You know what I'm saying? Uh, that's going to be interesting. But overall, I give the edge to the Celtics because they got bench depth and they got you know that's pretty much the difference in the series. In my opinion, is they got bench depth and they have um, more than just one offensive player because technically teams could just scheme against Malone, right? Now, the reason why I think this is just me, the reason why they had more success with Jeff Hornacek is because the other guys who played along them, like scores, like Thurl Bailey, Jeff Malone, um, even Daryl Griffin, they were scorers, right? But they weren't necessarily spot up shooters. Don't be wrong, Daryl Griffin can hit a three, but they weren't spot up shooters. If you look at Utah's offense, the role players, other guys, they often were relegated to being mostly, if Malone's getting, for instance, double team, right? What Malone do? He would kick it out to a guy for either three or a guy for a long two. And statistically, that wasn't a really good shot. With Jeff Hornacek, on the other hand, that was an efficient shot for him. That was his bread and butter. Step in or spot up threes or spot up long twos. He could knock those down with great efficiency, and that helped. Also, it helped that even though Olsztag wasn't really much of a fucking center, he still was the best center that they had, and for all of Shaq's so-called dominance, Olsztag did a pretty good job slowing down Shaq for the most part, which really tells me that if you put Wilt Chamberlain on Shaq, man, we wouldn't even be having these conversations about who was the most dominant. It wouldn't even be a conversation. And man, I just saw some breaking news, y'all. Oh my god, I gotta do a video on this. I just saw some breaking news. Unbelievable. Um, I was gonna do another video for Dorian, but I'm gonna have to do that one after this one. I just seen some breaking news. Let me just go cut to the chase. I think I think that the Celtics win this series in six. But I got some breaking news for y'all. Tell me what you guys think.